Hello, everyone. This is my first live stream that I am actually doing all of the tech for. So, trying to work it out and trying to see how it works. But here we are, I think, I hope. And I am here with Cindy Beaver.
And this is
And
my totally first live stream ever. So, hi.
yeah, so we're excited to be here. This is a new thing for me. I have been on this channel, Faith Unaltered, before, but uh, it's been a little bit hit and miss as far as trying to work out how technology works for me and things like the whole room ambiance and my computer not messing up and all of that kind of stuff. So new experience here, but I'm excited to be here. And this is a new segment. It's called Pilgrims in a Holy Land. And I have invited Cindy today to talk with me about Christmas traditions. But before we get into that, Cindy, do you want to say anything about yourself and introduce everyone to you?
Sure. My name is Cindy Beaver and friend of Carey Griffel. I've appeared on her podcast, Genesis Marks the Spot, several times now. My goal for this year has been to be the most popular guest on the show. And so I'm honored to be on the first live stream. I studied under Dr. Michael Heiser, similar to Carey, completed the Awakening School Certificate Program, the initial one. And I've been doing Bible study for well over 20 years and just got really deep into it. I grew up Lutheran, but I have recently changed my affiliation and I was chrismated into the Eastern Orthodox Church in August.
Hmm. So that's a change for you for Christmas this year.
Yes, it will be, and it has been. Now, I've been attending the parish for the past year and a half, so I did experience their Christmas celebrations, which are significantly different than an evangelical background, which we'll be talking about. But on the flip side, I was a catechumen at the time, so I didn't have uh, as strict of a requirements, and I wouldn't even say requirements. The way my priest always put it, it's the goal. It's not a requirement. It's you what you should be aiming towards, which is so healthy, I think. Nothing is really mandated, but it's highly recommended because you're going to get the most out of it, and your faith will grow in response to how much you put into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as you go, you're just learning more, kind of feeling like you're getting into it deeper, that kind of thing.
Exactly, as well as participating in a community. That's what I really love about my parish and the way that the Orthodox world is that it really encourages community and working together. And I mean, I wind up spending half the day at church on Sunday, and people are like, how, normally I'm like, my son is like, after 30 minutes, it's like, can we go? Is it time to go yet? And yet it's not. I don't have that feeling at all when I'm at my church now. I'm with my family and I want to be there, and there's just so much love and sharing, and I'm not in a hurry to leave. So that's a fabulous experience, and I would encourage anybody to try it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, as far as like your background as being Lutheran, um, what would you say is the change from this where you are now and that feeling you have and what you used to have? What would
uh,
be the big difference?
well, for one thing, in the Orthodox Church, there's four. There's 6 Sundays in Advent, not four.
Mm.
And I would say that it's much more reverent about being thoughtful. We're fasting. It's similar to what we're doing, the Lenten experience, where you fast through, for the 6 weeks prior to Easter or Pascha, as it's called in the Orthodox Church. And so we're doing the Nativity fast, which is not, when you think fasting, you think much more of like Ramadan, where they don't eat during the daylight hours. That's not an Orthodox fast. With Orthodoxy, you're fasting from meats, dairy, oil, and wine. But you can have all the other foods. So you can have breads, you can have fruits and vegetables and things. It's just that you're not, there are certain things that you are not partaking of on certain days. And there are days where you may have fish. There are days where you can use oil. You have to kind of look at the calendar and watch and see. So, I mean, that's one major difference. But I would think, it just was within my Lutheran experience and growing up, it was much more just the looking forward to Christmas and having the Christmas pageant and singing all those Christmas songs and seeing all the family and Hallmark movie Christmas type stuff. And yes, there was, you'd go to church in the different Sundays of Advent, you'd light another candle and you'd learn about the meaning of that particular candle. And I could never figure out why the pink candle, 3 purple, 1 pink. And I'm like, I would always think the pink one should be the last one, but it was like the third one. And I was like, I don't get it. One's for the angels, one's for the shepherds, but it seemed kind of arbitrary. And I never, I knew it at the time, but I've long forgotten what all that symbolism means. But it was, you just brought into the whole commercialization of it and the gift giving and everything's big and it's just all waiting for the big party. And it's a very different approach within Orthodoxy where you are fasting and abstaining, and they don't eat or they don't break the fast until Christmas Day. So even on Christmas Eve, and it winds up being an issue for me because I have a long-standing family tradition where we get together with my cousin's family and have pizza and pie. We've done it, like I said, for at least 30 years now. And so I wind up not able to participate in all of the Christmas Eve festivities with my church family because I have a family obligation that I choose to attend because it's just so special.
So it sounds to me like a lot of the difference for you is just the knowledge and the theology. Like it's because you've changed from the commercial and society kind of observance, we might say, to something that's a little bit more centered on a theological purpose, I guess. I don't know if that's the best way to say it, but something
It
along
is.
those
It's
lines.
very, very true. I mean, the whole reason why I went into Orthodoxy is because of being exposed to the Divine World Council, the Divine Council worldview, and just the more I learned of it, the more I saw my church experience was broken. It was missing huge chunks, and I just got to the point where I encountered Orthodoxy. I went and I experienced it, and it was like, yes, this is the path that I choose. This aligns far much more with my biblical theological understanding, and it just connects more, and there's more meaning there, and they live it out in their whole life. I mean, with Orthodoxy, you have a prayer corner with icons, and your home is holy too. The priest during the month of January, it's called the Theophany, and the priest comes and blesses your home with holy water. And so it's like you are much more reminded that even your day in, day out living should be Christian, should reflect your beliefs and your practices, and you should continually be striving. Whereas most of the time, in my evangelical growing up, it was just like, okay, we did church, at 9 o'clock from 9 to 10. We might have gone to Sunday school or something like that. And then boom, out we go, through the parking lot and honk your horn at somebody that's, butted in you and hurry up and let's get off to have our lunch, and stuff like that. It was more of a just go in and get it done and leave. And not that you can't be reverent in that setting. I'm not saying that you can't, because I was faithful and I did believe, but there's just something that for me was missing. And I have found something that really resonates within Orthodoxy.
Yeah. Well, I can kind of sympathize with that because I was raised LDS, and Christmas is a really big deal for me when I was growing up, and we did a lot of stuff, but we didn't have like the really long traditions. And you see, I would see Christian friends, and they would have their practices of the Advent and things like that, and I wouldn't quite understand everything that they were doing because for LDS theology and practice, it felt like to me, at any rate, that a lot of our practice was just kind of picked and chosen as far as we'll do this and we'll do that one and we'll do this, and we're not quite sure what to do with everything else. But so it was a very intense time for as when it was the holidays. I loved the holidays. And I think that I loved the holidays so much because that was the time where you did get that more intense theological meaning to your daily life and practice. And I think that was appealing to me. And then when I got to be an adult, and I started going to a Lutheran church for a while, and that was way, way different because that was more of a, like a, more liturgy, I guess, more formality, more theology that was deeply embedded into all of the practices that we were doing. So, we had, when I was little in the LDS church, we did the 12 days of Christmas, but guess what? No one knew when the 12 days were. I was like, Mom, when do the 12 days of Christmas start? And she counts from Christmas to before. So we were like, starts on the 13th, starts on the 14th. We don't know. We'll just guess. And it's like, that didn't seem quite right to me, but I didn't know enough people to ask about it. And so I was like, oh, okay. It was just so very
And they
different.
didn't have Google in those days.
Right. It was a lot harder to find out information. So, I had Christian friends, but even they weren't super steeped in a lot of theology and understanding of the Christian tradition. So they weren't really very helpful at all. And so I was like, okay, I don't know. And so when got into the Lutheran tradition, that felt so much richer. It was like this higher level of practice. And I guess reverence is a word because you have the practice and the ideas that are all wrapped up into what you're doing, right? And to me, Christmas was, I was a kid, so it's about playing and toys and all of the fun things about Christmas. And when I got to be an adult and started realizing those are a little bit, I mean, I thought in my teenage years, I was like, there needs to be more. And so I started getting deeper into scripture, trying to understand it on a deeper level. But even then, it felt like I was trying to draw two things together that didn't quite match. And so when I started getting into a historical tradition where they had a long history of Advent tradition, and this is why we're doing it, and all of the special things that are suddenly happening inside the church that don't happen in other seasons in the church, it makes a difference.
It does. And I would say, as I think back now, refocusing my brain with our Christmas traditions at the Lutheran church where I grew up, we had two big trees that would be decorated. And they were decorated in things called chrismons. And most of them were like different white, they were all white. And they were all, different variations of crosses and things like that. And so, but that was, every year the two huge trees at the front that flanked either side of a tall stained glass window in the shape of a cross. So that was
Mm-hmm.
pretty, and it was. We had red carpeting in that altar area, and so it always looked festive with that. And then on Christmas Eve, we would have put on a Christmas pageant. We did not have live animals, which, oh, thank goodness. But we would have, little animals, sheep or things that we would carry. My cousins once asked, "Why is Cindy dressed in a dish towel and stuff like that?" And it's like, well, I was a shepherd that year, and those types of things. And that was fun to have my family, including relatives from out of town that were there to see me in the pageant and stuff like that. And then our tradition was always after the Christmas Eve service, we would go to my grandma's house and we'd all be there. And, she would have us sing songs, and she had all these music folders. But they weren't all the same, and none of them had all the same songs. So we were always struggling to figure out what songs do we have that everybody has the words to. Not that we didn't have it memorized. My grandpa would always read from the Luke story. And that would kick off the present opening and the singing. And then there were a few years where my grandma had gotten the next door neighbor to dress up as Santa Claus and scare the crap out of us because he came and would pound on the picture window. And I mean, the room was full of people and chairs with their backs to the window, and then to have some boom, boom, boom come on the window. And anyway, it was fun. It was special to have, and in that era, there was, 6 or 7 kids that were all, 5 to 15 years in age, those fun years where you're looking forward to the gifts and stuff like that. And to have the cousins and family together, it was special times.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to have this very diverse experience of Christmas. And, it's really easy for us at some point in time to get to this idea that, oh, the way I did it before it was so terrible, and you're going to just find all of the ways that are wrong about what you did. And I mean, maybe that's true, but you can't really deny that you had all of these things that were good, that were very valuable.
Well, it was very, uh, those are my memories that I have of my grandma, and she was a wonderful cook and baker, and she had all of these fabulous things for us to eat. And then she had awful things like head cheese that I wouldn't touch, and herring that is for old people. Um, but those things. But we were all together, and even my other grandparents who also lived in the same town, they were invited and welcomed. And so and we all got a little bit of wine, and it was just a very, very special thing. And so those, you look back with such fond memories, because I mean, that's why this thing that I still do on Christmas Eve is the last bit of that family that still gets together.
Oh,
And so the people that are still there, it's just me and my sister, and if my parents come, we're the ones that are originals to my grandma's days. But my cousin's family, my cousin passed away, but his family has perpetuated. And again, it's a variation, but it's because of what my grandma did that we continue to meet. And so it's been my entire life, really, that this thing with these people has been going on.
Yeah, yeah. So, what are the kinds of differences that you now have aside from the fasting and maybe less commercialization that you have? But what are the
Right.
other differences that you see?
So it's interesting because St. Nicholas and St. Nicholas Day is very, very important. As a matter of fact, yesterday or Wednesday was a feast day. Yes, that was for St. Nicholas. And on Sunday, during our coffee hour after we had church services, there was an activity for the children, and I wasn't able to stay, but St. Nicholas, dressed as a bishop from the 4th century, he does
Oh,
come and
wow.
meet with the children and that type of a thing. So not the ho 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 Santa with presents, but much more the St. Nicholas that we all know and love and treasure. But St. Nicholas was a real person. He was a bishop on the seacoast of the Mediterranean. And he attended the First Ecumenical Council, and he did give all of his wealth away to those less fortunate or going through difficult times. And there were various miracle works that are associated with him. And so again, it is something that is special that the Orthodox Church does remember. And yesterday, as the feast day, our church had a special liturgy, divine liturgy service. So we would have had the Eucharist and everything. I did not attend because it was at 6:30 in the morning, but sorry. But those members that can make it do attend and celebrate liturgy in remembrance of Saint Nicholas.
Mhm,
So
mhm. Yeah.
that's important to remember. But again, they're not doing the commercial side. It's definitely the bishop and the wonder working miracles that he did.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah. And
Then when we think about
oh, go ahead.
on like Christmas Eve, there is a holy supper that it takes place where the entire church is getting together on Christmas Eve, but it's still all the Lenten type foods or
Mm,
the feast type foods because our fast isn't broken until Christmas Day itself.
mhm.
And so they'll be, eating whatever, wonderful, tasty things they can, but making use of the foods that are available. And then at starting at 10:30, our church, anyways, I can tell about our church, is we start a vigil, which is really the great compline combined with our matins prayers. And so it's well over an hour worth of singing and chanting various Bible verses and Psalms and things like that that are describing or leading up to the birth of the Christ child. And then at midnight is when the divine liturgy starts. So
Mm.
I anticipate being there and I do plan to attend the church service at night. My family thing is earlier in the day. So I anticipate being there from 10:30 until probably 2:30 in the morning, uh,
Wow.
in a worship setting.
Wow, that's amazing. That sounds fun to me. Maybe not everyone else. I am a night owl, so I'd be all right with those hours.
Come on over. But very, very different. I mean, with prior to Orthodoxy, my Lutheran church, we had I was part of a huge evangelical. It was Lutheran, it was ELCA, but they'd have, like 7 services on Christmas Eve, starting at 1:30, so that the families with kids and this and thing, and it wasn't any pageantry or anything like that. It was a Christmas service with lots of carols, but they'd have them, in 1 hour, and then enough time for the parking lot to turn over for the next service and the next service and the next service, and then the last 2 services starting at like 9:30 and then 11 o'clock p.m. Those would have communion served with them. And candlelight would start at like the 5:30, 6 o'clock, because it gets dark around 5 o'clock here in Minnesota. So,
Right.
but that was such an orchestrated thing and regimented. It was not particularly holy. It was just how are we going to get all of I mean, Easter is the same way in that particular setting of the masses of people that come for Easter and Christmas. We got to get them through. And so there's usually one door for going in and a different door for going out, and ushers and ropes, and here's where you can go, and the stragglers are then helped to find an available seat by one of the ushers, and so on and so forth. But you know so it's the commotion and all of that. You sometimes it can distract, but the music is gorgeous. I mean, they have a huge pipe organ, and it is, I just a deep bass, pipes going, just gets, when it rattles in your chest, is something that I just love, and I do miss that. There are no instruments in an Orthodox church, but the a cappella voices have a beauty of their own.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So this will be your second year in an Orthodox situation at Christmas.
yes.
Do they have fewer, I, I don't want to say extra people, but I mean, I don't know what else to say. When you have other churches, a lot of times you'll have people that only show up on Christmas, maybe Easter, and you don't know who they are. So it's a little bit awkward and hard to have that kind of family feeling with those people when you don't really know them, and you're like, well, I'd like to know you, but it's probably the only time I'm going to see you. But do they have a lot of extra people at Orthodox churches, well, at least at yours?
Yes, because there are members that aren't as diligent and regular, and
Sure.
so the entire family will come because it's Christmas or because it's Pascha, and so it's definitely a lot more full. But and I wouldn't say that we don't have visitors, because if you have relatives
Sure.
from out of town staying with you, they may come. So yeah, there is, but I wouldn't say it's not nearly, the volume that I've seen in the Lutheran Church, where it's like quadruple the number of
Yeah.
people, which is why we need
Right.
this many services, and why we have to have
Mm-hmm.
people in the parking lot and people in the narthex ushering people around with cords in order to herd them appropriately, and streamline the entrance and exit process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's such a difference. Of course, in my LDS upbringing, we didn't have visitors hardly ever, so it was never really even that kind of experience I had in the Lutheran Church. And my church now is a non-denominational church; it's just a small church. But even so, we get extra people show up, and I go, I wonder who you are. I don't know. It's a little easier to talk to them because our church is very small, but it's an interesting thing. And of course, a lot of times it is the visiting family, and that's really nice to get a chance to see the family of the people who are in your family. Oops.
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
just knocking down lights here now. But did you want to talk about some of the more historical aspects of Christianity?
Sure, we can go back into that. I mean, I think a lot of people, really wonder, how is it that December 25th was picked? And there's a lot of theories about it. And if you're at all familiar with Dr. Mike Heiser's work, you know that the real Christmas date, according to the star charts as of the information revealed in Revelation 12, September 11th, is more than likely the real date of Jesus' birth. So, how is it that we got to December 25th?
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of scholarly debate that goes back and forth, that, oh, it was, to replace pagan, ceremonies like the solstice or the Saturnalia. But, Saturnalia was an entire week long festival, and this is just a single day. So probably not.
Yeah, and
Um,
the dates don't actually line up either.
right. And the solstice too, that moves, and it's usually, a few days period. I wouldn't say I mean, I think that over time certain aspects of those pagan practices may have been assimilated in. If you think of the Yule log, if you think of even bringing in Christmas trees and things like that, um, but I would think it was much more of an accommodation or a new tradition that as people that used to do other things and it wasn't something that they could give up, it got Christianized.
Hmm.
Um,
Right, right. I mean, it reminds me of what you were saying about the bishop coming in like Santa,
yeah,
like Saint Nick. Like it's kind of trying to cross over and give people the experience that is kind of around in our society today, but going, okay, let's make it what it should be a little bit more than what it was in outside the context of the church.
exactly. But if we look at the date, and I just happened to be watching a patristics YouTube video earlier today, and it reminded me, and again because I haven't been Orthodox all that long, but the feast of the Annunciation is on March 25th, and so if Jesus's birth was announced on March 25th, 9 months after that, you get December 25th. And so that is how the early church came to that particular date. They were just looking at, how would this have happened? But in early Christian, I mean, they didn't celebrate Christmas. In the first, couple hundred centuries, it was all about Pascha, Easter, the death and resurrection. That was the huge celebration and the feast. And then as there were martyrs, then there would be the different saints' days and things like that. But it wasn't until 200-300 years later that people were a little bit more curious about, well, when was Jesus born? And I mean, it's important to us to acknowledge and remember the coming of the light and this. And so, December 25th, like we said, is probably not his birthday, but that's not necessarily the worst date to pick because he is, it is right around that solstice time, and we do have the symbology of the light coming into the world and the light that shines in the darkness through this darkest time of the year. Um, it's it's a wonderful symbology
Yeah,
that is able
it's a
to
good
be.
way to have that. Um, what's interesting to me in that all of the dates that people tend to talk about, we have December 25th, we have March, and now we have September that we're bringing into the conversation as far as what day could Jesus have been born? Why are there sheep in the field when we wouldn't expect to see the sheep in the field in December? And I think that we're getting a little bit too hung up on particulars, but it's super interesting that you have these kinds of really interesting 9-month spans between time. And the question of is the birth or the conception more important? They probably both matter. And maybe all of these dates are kind of involved in those things. Like if he was born in September, what's 9 months before that? It's actually December. So it's, you have all of these possibilities. And does it matter what date it is so much? This is a fascinating conversation to me today because tomorrow my next Genesis Marks the Spot episode is coming out, and I'm actually talking about calendars and the effect that calendar has on the Pentateuch in particular. And so I go through this book called The Liturgy of Creation. And in this book, the idea is that the calendars and dates in the Pentateuch are not there because those happen to be the calendar dates that things happened on. But rather, the Pentateuch is, it's formed and the structure of the Pentateuch is based on Israel's festival calendar. So they had a particular festival calendar, and so when they were recording all of their history and putting it all down, it's not that they were changing the dates to be convenient. This is just how they dealt with calendar. They put dates that were meaningful in, and you can see that in scripture all over the place, actually, if you look really closely. This is probably why we have the differences in the Passion Week, for instance, with the Synoptic Gospels and with John. they're both saying the same thing, they're just explaining it in a different way. And it's not that they were being difficult or trying to lie or make something up. This is how they were thinking of time. Just like we can change dates for our holidays, and we don't seem to have a problem with that, they were doing the same kind of thing. And it's really interesting.
I think it's too, we have to think back in that they did not have one single calendar. I mean, it's kind of a miraculous that we do now. The world runs around and everybody knows that, well, tonight is December 7th.
Yeah, you can look at your watch and say, this is the time. And
you know, they didn't. They had, this is the 3rd year of King Darius. This is the 17th year of Rehoboam, whatever king. And so it was very, that's part of what archaeology and the biblical people are trying to sync up. I mean, it's why, trying to figure out when was Joseph and Jacob and all of them in Egypt, and all the great, was it 1400s? Was it 1200s? Was it this and that, the other thing? They're trying to match up things even based on, oh, look at, there was a solstice or some other kind of event that was going on where, an eclipse, where this would have happened. And can we figure out when would an eclipse have happened? And the most likely date would be such and such. And to try to sync up the Mesopotamian calendar dates with the Egyptians, and then with what was going on in Rome and that type of a thing is very, very difficult, because there was not a common calendar. And so you can definitely see where within the Torah and the Bible, they are anchoring towards the festival calendar. And we know of the 3 festivals that were key to that God mandated. We've got the Passover, we've got the Sukkot, and what's the other one? Pesach. Anyways, so we've got the various things where they were required to come. And then with the Maccabees, they added Hanukkah, and which is still celebrated, kind of in competition with the Christmas. I wouldn't say it's really competition, but, it falls within the same time of year. And again, because of the whole lights and the lighting of the miraculous staying of the lights, the candelabra in the temple, with the little bit of oil that they had.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I don't know if you want to touch on this, but Advanced Apologetics mentions Orthodoxy celebrating Christmas another day. And to my understanding, that's because there was one portion of it had an idea that it was in January, the other portion had December, and they're kind of...
So what it is that it was there's a difference in calendars. And so there's the Julian calendar and then the one that is used, the newer calendar. And some of those portions of Orthodoxy continue to use the old calendar, and so they are 13 days behind, which is why you will see that some Orthodox churches are celebrating Christmas on January 6th, I think it is.
I think so.
Yeah, and really it's just a matter of old versus new calendar. And it's interesting because this summer I went up to Chisholm, Minnesota. There's a little Orthodox church that one of my a woman from my parish helps to sponsor. It's from her hometown, and this church would be closed down and shuttered if she and some others weren't working to keep it up. And so they hold this gathering and a festival in August, and it's a fundraiser as well. And they have the priest from the Serbian Orthodox church down the street come and do a divine liturgy for them. Well, we had this luncheon, but we had to have a fasting luncheon because the Serbian church uses the old calendar. So even though we under the Russian Orthodox, or we're actually OCA, but the Chisholm Church was a Russian Orthodox because of the calendar dates, and we knew we'd have leftovers. Therefore, we had to have a fasting type of a lunch served so that the leftovers could then be consumed by the Serbian church after they had divine liturgy on Sunday. So
Oh,
it
wow,
still
that's
exists.
fascinating.
But it's not a matter of, some people believe it's January 6th. It really is. It's just that their December 25th falls on a
On a
different
different day.
date.
Hmm. Calendars are so crazy.
Well, think about the Essene calendar, and they were
Hmm.
so critical of the temple because they had were using the Ptolemaic calendar. So, it's like the Jerusalem temple had adjusted to world calendar and world politics and all of that. And so we're following this. The Essenes point, and also to a certain extent the Orthodox point, then, is that we are trying to align with the dates of God's calendar. And if the festival is not celebrated properly on the proper day, we're not in sync or in harmony with heaven. And that is far more important to us than being aligned with the world.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's really fascinating to me that you have all of the different traditions, and they can say different things and look at it in different ways, and it is different, but at the same time it's like, well, can you understand it from their perspective first of all? Because if you don't understand that, then you're not even listening to them. So first of all, it's a matter of just being a faithful listener and trying to hear what they have to say. And then second of all, can we both, or can everyone just bring forth their perspective and then, actually talk about it and see what lines up and what doesn't, and how does that line up with scripture? And that's one of my passions.
So, Carey, is your Christmas tree up?
So, our Christmas tree. So several years ago, I don't know how many years ago, I had this great idea that, because I've never liked chopping down the tree for the Christmas tree. I, I I kind of enjoy a fresh Christmas tree. It smells nice. There's a lot of nice things about it, but to me, there's always been this thing in the back of my mind that it's been like, you're killing a tree to celebrate the birth of Christ. That seems wrong to me on some level. Like, I'm not trying to say it, tell anybody they shouldn't do that. But for me personally, as a personal thing, I was like, that doesn't seem right. So I've got this great idea. We'll get a live tree and then we'll plant it after Christmas. The problem is that doesn't really work in Idaho. The ground is not okay for planting for a long time until after Christmas. And so every year we've done this. Every year the tree dies, and I'm like, that is not the symbolism I'm going for here. So we're still trying to work out, like, what do we want to do for a Christmas tree. This year I actually got a fake cherry blossom tree, and we're decorating that. Just because I want to be different. I don't know. The kids are enjoying doing something a little bit different with the tree this year. So that's what we're doing.
So I'm an artificial tree person. Uh, I can remember when I was really, really little, we had real trees, and one of them was at least one year it was flocked, with that
Oh,
spray stuff. Oh
right.
my gosh, that is a huge mess. Let me just tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandma always had real trees, but the needles and the mess, and you have cats, and I was just like, I'm not dealing with a real tree and a cat. I'm not. Although when I was married, I am now divorced, but when I was married, Kurt always wanted to have real trees, and so we did alternate, and we got extra prickly kind of trees that would discourage cat climbing. Um,
Sort of. Did it work?
it did work, but Katie always recognized the years when it was my tree, because her nickname is Angel Face, or was Angel Face, because of her preferred position on the tree. She likes to be high. Um, so, but typically before I got married, I like to have the tree up, put it up like the day after Thanksgiving. That was part of okay, I wait till Thanksgiving, put the tree up, decorate, do all the things, and have all the lovely things up, because it just, to me, that was part of the Christmas preparation and Christmas experience. Um, but prior to this, as we were talking this afternoon, we did talk about, where people take the tree down is the minute, Christmas, after Christmas Day. And I never did that. I would wait at least till New Year's, before that. Um, and my ex-husband always wanted to wait. First of all, his birthday is December 1st, and he didn't want to have a tree up until after his birthday. And it's like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, so December 2nd, I'm like, I gotta have this stuff. I have to have this all done. And it was interesting, the year that my son was going to turn 1. His parents, my ex's parents, were going to be going down to Florida, and so they were going to miss holidays. So I had, and Andrew's birthday, my son's birthday is December 28th. So anyway, so I had one room decorated for a birthday party. I had one room decorated for Christmas, and I had one room decorated for Thanksgiving, so that we could celebrate the 3 big holiday, and festivals that particular year. But that was like the only year that I was able to get Christmas stuff up really early. But I do have, I did finally I have everything except the one mantle with where the stockings go. I need to finish that up with my decorating. At least I'm stopping. I've just decided to stop. This is good enough.
Oh, yeah, yeah. See, and we would get the fake trees early on, but I feel like they have better fake trees now. But back then, like all of the fake trees, they would just shed almost as bad as a real tree, like needles all over the floor. And like, why do we have an artificial tree if it's just as messy as a real one? We might as well just get a real one in that case.
And then your house smells good.
Hmm, hmm. So Joshua asks, do we like ham or turkey?
I'm a ham girl for Christmas. Unless my mom is making it, then I prefer turkey.
Oh, there you go. That's a good way to do it. We would alternate when I was little, and some years we'd have ham, other years we'd have turkey. But it's like Christmas is right after, or yeah, Christmas is after Thanksgiving, and we already had turkey. So I like turkey, but we just had one, so we don't need another one.
Well, I don't know. You've never had my mom's turkey and all the. I mean,
Mm.
it's all my favorite foods in one day: mashed potatoes, dressing, pumpkin pie. I can have a whole nother day of those again. And then the day after Thanksgiving, it was just as much of a tradition where my sister and my mom and I would go out Black Friday shopping, and we'd come home from shopping, and my dad had made baking powder biscuits, and we would have the leftover turkey and gravy poured over those as our.
Oh, there
So,
you go.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
yeah. But I've also had lasagna on Christmas Day. That's a
Mm-hmm.
good.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people starting to do more things like lasagna or like steak. I could do steak. I'd be all right with that too.
A lot of European countries have fish. A lot of different
Mm,
fish
yeah,
dishes.
yeah.
Especially, I think in Italy is the 12 fish or something like that festival. So not definitely not a huge fan of lutefisk, but there are those Swedes and Norwegians that like to have their lutefisk.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, these days, well, after I started having kids and you just want to enjoy the kids, we don't tend to have a big meal on Christmas at all. And I kind of like it because then if hopefully you've had plenty of food before that. So it's like we have leftovers. It's not a problem. We don't need to cook.
Whatever works, yeah.
Yeah. So as far as like the date and the importance of it, you have so many Christians these days who want to defend certain dates and say this is why we have the date, and so I was wondering about, well, earlier I was thinking about this and thinking about the importance of dates and how those matter to us, and you look at early Christianity and they didn't have that same concern, at least as far as the birth of Christ. And I think that's why we see it takes so long for them to have a date written. I mean, of course, there's also the fact that we don't have a whole lot of the documents from the early church. They probably just don't exist anymore. And also the idea that they weren't they were concerned about other things rather than the exact date of Jesus' birth, right?
They were far more interested in defining the Trinity and was Jesus man and God, and that whole mystery, and then fighting against heretics.
Mm-hmm.
So that was far more important than, well, even they didn't all use the same Bibles. Whatever translation of the Septuagint that they had, or the Bible, whatever version they had, whatever combination of books they had at the Jewish synagogues, that's usually what the congregation would adopt in the Christian churches. And so some of them, where we get all huffy about, is this in the Apocrypha or is this, in the pseudepigrapha and this and that and the other thing. That they were far less concerned with that. They were much more concerned with having scriptures available,
Right, right. Yeah.
in a form that could be read aloud to the congregation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we forget just how far removed we are from that kind of a
Yep.
context.
Exactly. I mean, you do see where various bishops on their Easter addresses to their, communities, and they're like, these are what is recommended. These are the books that are most frequently used and read in our churches, and this is what we encourage. But it wasn't Constantine that set what the New Testament. It wasn't a bunch of people. It really was by common consensus through usage in the liturgical processes. And for me, within the Orthodox Church, one of the things that is so special is that the Divine Liturgy was created. There's two different versions that we use. There's one by John Chrysostom and one by Basil the Great. Both of those people lived before 500, the year 500, and so that is, to me, one of the shining examples of how early Christianity has continued in the church. Yeah, there's a 500 year, 4 to 500 year gap between Christ and those people, but it's not like it was 1,000 years or 2,000 years. I mean,
Right.
and they had it together, and we still use what they wrote. We may sing a different tune, but the psalms that they read, the the prayers that are being said, all of those stem back almost 2,000 years now.
Yeah, yeah. It's incredible to me to think of the rich, just Christian history in general, and how we, no matter what kind of Christian tradition we are in, we can draw upon that history as well.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah, it's not this you can't do it because it's all ours kind of a situation.
No, and again, I even think, the whole, well, it's really pagan. They say that about Easter too, that Easter eggs and bunnies are all, the pagan stuff. And I'm like, well, yeah, probably, because it wasn't like Christ was hopping around with a bunny in the garden
We
that
don't,
first
we
morning,
don't
but
actually see any bunnies in the New Testament. Okay, we'll grant you
right.
that.
Yeah, or cracking open chocolate eggs, but they're pretty darn tasty.
Well, and again, it's about all of that, the symbolism that's attached to that. What does that mean?
Yeah,
And to us today, so few of us, at least in America and Europe, we're not living on the land. We're not super dependent on the cycle of the seasons, like in the way that they used to be. Like I can get bananas any day, and like that's not something that grows in this season, in this climate at all, let alone all year round.
right.
So
Or, when my mom put my stocking together, we always had an apple and an orange.
right,
And again, those fruits were not readily available in December back, 100 years ago. And
right.
now, yeah, we can have them anytime. It's like, oh, it's clementine season.
Yeah. It's just random random question, but what do you think about how the Victorian culture and time impacted our Christian traditions and Christmas traditions today?
Charles Dickens and all his stories.
Hmm.
And the whole Germanic decorating of our Christmas trees.
Ah.
Uh, Even in that era too, you have to think that's when the Industrial Revolution was going on.
Hmm.
People were, there was more people were working and living in a city situation as opposed to the country.
Yeah.
Um, Lots of different things. Really, I mean, A Christmas Carol is something that is always going on at the Guthrie Theater here in Minneapolis at Christmas time. I mean, it's just, you can count on it. So if you want to see that, you can see it. Think of Scrooge. I mean, and then you think of how even, Disney picked up on it with the, was it Daffy Duck and all of them with the
Yeah.
Scrooge McDuck or whatever.
Oh, and the Muppets version. I
Yep.
love the
hmm
Muppets version.
So I think that, they definitely, Christmas cards, all of that,
Hmm.
even,
Yeah.
came from that era. So, so that was probably the start of the commercialization of Christmas. Um,
Yeah. Probably so.
Yeah, and I know
Yeah.
that, Victoria's husband was from Germany, and so that was a lot of the Germanic, with the
Mm.
Christmas tree and the ornaments and things like that. It came, he brought that influence in.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I have often wondered what impact that that kind of new culture had, or I guess, did it stem from the Industrial Revolution? That's what I wondered, and I kind of have a feeling that it really did because at the time, like life had changed in a very radical way for people, and they were again, like you said, they were in the city, kind of dark and dreary. What are they
There
going to
was
do to get out of that?
there was steam, steam engines, and I was reading a romance novel set in the 1850 era, and they're like, um, even when I looked, sorry, I was in Chicago earlier this year, and you could see all of the old, um, um, a lot of the industrial area, and they had water towers, little water towers on top
Mm.
of all of the buildings. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah,
oh,
yeah.
that where they would have collected and stored and stuff, because they were, and think of all the coal they were burning and just how sooty everything would have been. When I was in college, my college was on a 414 plan. So I had a 4-month semester, a 1-month J term, January term, and then a 4-month
Oh,
semester. And I was able to travel to Europe during January, and I went and I was in Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Yugoslavia, back when it was called that. I'm that old.
Right.
And so, anyways, there I am in Prague, and they still burn coal, and very, very sooty and slippery. I mean, that grease. Just a little bit of water, a little bit of ice, and all that greasiness that's on the surface. There's no traction. You are falling. So I was just like, ugh, and just thinking, and to think that it wasn't even my experience of that was, like maybe 10% of what it would have been like
Hmm.
uh,
Right.
in the
Yeah.
1800s.
Yeah. So just this idea of a little bit extra hope and festivity at the time, especially in the middle of winter.
When
I
it's
think,
cold
yeah.
and you're just trying to think about Cratchit and his family, and how they wanted to have a goose, and they're like, well, we might be able to have a squab, a little capon. They're not going to be able to afford a big fat old goose to have on their table that year. So
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's just interesting to me how different kinds of the situations that society moves through and how those impact us. And sometimes we don't realize how they impact us. We just think, oh, this is the way Christmas has always been. That's definitely not the case. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that we can like trace through all of that and see the 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 different the meanings and the purpose behind those, and then ask ourselves, are they honoring God, or are they not? Do we need to kind of scale back this aspect of Christian tradition and Christmas time, or just lean more into it and give that more meaning?
well, I think too, how you know my grandparents went through the depression, and so and the paper thing. No, Scrooge's heart did not grow 3 sizes that day. You're confusing him with the Grinch. But Cindy Lou Who did help with the Grinch.
Oh,
but
I
I
bet you get
what
that a lot.
Yeah, what I would say is, so my grandparents went through the Depression, and just think about how hard that was, especially at Christmas time, where, providing an orange would have been like a real huge treat.
Right.
Or then, after the war and in the 50s and 60s, then you're getting that baby boomer culture and the new America with the men and I mean, it was one of the greatest generations that survived the war and came back and built what they built in that era. And you look at TV shows from the 60s like Bewitched or like Father Knows Best, and all of those things of what middle class life was like. And that was kind of my picture of my Christmas experience, is that kind of a life. Yeah, we were middle class, but we were we were comfortable. We could do some of the special things. I got special things at Christmas time. And then you look at it now, and families are dissociated.
Mm,
I
very, very much.
very, my folks are in Arizona. My sister goes off and does her thing. So I'm not even with my whole immediate family much anymore on Christmas, except for that, getting together with my cousins, like I said. Um, and yes, you can call, but it's not the same. It's not like going to grandma's house and having all that stuff.
Right.
And I don't know. Do you get together with extended family?
It depends on the year. I mean, we do, but depending on who's around and what they're doing, and everybody's kind of doing their thing. When I first got married, it was very much we all went to my husband's grandma's house, and everybody was there. And that was super reliable for years until it wasn't anymore, just because everybody grows, they depart, they go different places, and it's kind of depressing. It's a bit sad, but you do what you can, and you get together the people you can, and appreciate that still. But it does feel like families these days are so much more just just off on their own, and it I don't know if it's the culture, I don't know if it's just the society and the economics we have today. It's a very different experience.
Yep. I know with in my early married years, we would alternate, but a lot of times when we'd be with my husband's family, we would all trek up to northern Wisconsin, and my sister-in-law had what I referred to as a log mansion at the time. I mean, she had several bedrooms. It could accommodate all of us very comfortably. And so that was wonderful. But it got to the point where one of my other sister-in-laws finally was like, I just want Christmas Day to be my family. And that really fractured the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing to the point where, now Christmas is, we just kind of are trying to find a date where we can get together. That
Right.
isn't going to conflict with everybody's schedule. And I mean, that was a very sad thing to see but you're right. Um, no family tradition is going to last forever.
Right. Right.
Seasons change, people age, then you have new bunch of kids and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's hard for us to understand. Are things really changing in a big way, or is it just that I'm getting older and I see the change, and it's something that's happening to me and my situation?
Yep.
Yeah.
But I think looking back at it, I mean, so I would say that Christmas time I- it was Christ focused. And I had that upbringing and things like that. I would just say that it's for me within the Orthodox Church now, it's much more focused on the Christian life and living that way as opposed to the holiday experience.
Yeah, 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 and that's an interesting change, and not something you can complain about really, or say is is worse. It's just it's different, and it's a deepening thing. Hopefully, I hope for all of us every year it's a little bit deeper, a little bit more meaning, a little bit more understanding, and love in a different way, perhaps.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think we can just end there. Did you? Is there? Were there any other topics you wanted to get into in particular?
No, I think we did a really nice job, and I think we're at a good ending point.
Yeah. Well, I hope you have a great Christmas and an Advent season and all of the associated things for you and for everyone else who's watching as well.
Yes. Have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you.